The San Francisco 49ers have fired defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. Was it the right move? Where do they go next? And who may take over? We'll talk about it on an emergency instant reaction podcast. What is good, everybody? Welcome to an instant reaction podcast here on the Gold Standard and the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Rob Stats Guerrera. Breaking news just came across. The 49ers have fired defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. He is not going to return as DC in 2025. It's going to be the fourth defensive coordinator in 4 years for the Niners. Now, according to Matt Maiocco, this is not surprising, by the way, the 49ers are hoping to retain Nick Sorensen in some way, but he will not, I repeat, not be the defensive coordinator. Matt Maiocco said the hope is the Niners can retain him on Kyle Shanahan's staff. There are a few attractive options for the 49ers to now consider for the DC role. How are you feeling about this? Let me know your reaction in the chat. Want to get as many reactions from you as possible. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are going to have their end-of-season press conference at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. So we had a feeling that this news may be coming out because they're not going to speak until they can say whether he's going to be back as defensive coordinator or not. Just checking your reactions really quick. Some of you are feigning shock, as we all know. Modelo Time 1999 on Twitch, as I just said, says lots of defensive coordinator candidates are available. And here's the thing. If you are the 49ers, you have to act quickly because coaches are being fired. Coaches are getting new jobs. New people are becoming head coaches. And obviously, when you become a head coach, you need a staff. So you're calling around to your buddies. You're calling around to all the new coordinators that are out there. So the 49ers couldn't sit on their hands and decide, gee, do we really want to get rid of Nick Sorensen or not? They had to decide, and they have made that decision. And look, I've made no secret. I felt like he had to be out. I felt like there were breakdowns with this team, and they were consistent, and they were coaching breakdowns. Too many men on the field, too much confusion. Trips bunch confused the 49ers all year long. It was constant. Every time the other team went to Trips bunch, the Niners didn't know what they were doing. It never got any better. That's a coaching issue. And this isn't to bash Nick Sorensen. I don't think he was ready for the job. He may be in a couple years. I think he was over his skis last year. I really do. They were confused. There was no creativity. There was no creativity. The 49ers blitzed more than one player less than 2% of the time last year. They almost never blitzed. And when they did, it was one dude. And all you got to do is pick up one guy and you're good. That ain't it. Okay, you need more disguise. You need more confusion. We just saw the Lions, who got scrubs on defense at this point with all the injuries they've had. And they terrorized Sam Darnold and one of the best offenses of the year on Sunday Night Football in the last week of the season in a gotta-have-it game. Nick Sorensen wasn't doing that, and I get it. I get the talent wasn't quite there. I agree. The talent has eroded on this defense. Some of that is, all of that is not Nick Sorensen's fault. And some of the deficiencies that we saw from the defense were because of that lack of talent, but not all of it. Not all of it. And there were too much, it was too much confusion. It was too much simplicity. There was no adjustments. You had veterans talking about the fact that they didn't make adjustments. Too many problems to bring Nick Sorensen back. And you saw it at the end of the year. I mean, the Cardinals dropped 47 points on the 49ers. They lost 7 of 9 games after the bye, which is not all Sorensen's fault, but the defense allowed 35 points at least in 4 of the last 7 games. Maybe he could have saved his job if they had played better down the stretch. Maybe. But it just got worse and worse and worse. It really did. And I feel bad for Nick Sorensen, but he had to go. He had to go. So now the 49ers are going to be looking to replace 2 of the 3 coaches on the staff, right? We knew special teams coordinator Brian Schneider got fired already. Now Nick Sorensen got fired. It's not a great look for the 49ers to have to fire all these coaches. Kyle Shanahan's the guy that keeps hiring these defensive coordinators that he keeps dumping after 1 year, right? He did it with Wilkes. Now he's doing it with Sorensen. Got to get it this time, Kyle. Got to get it right. Kaylee Miller, YouTube channel member, says, new guy just better be a significant upgrade. That's all I care about. Brian Smith says, what about Staley? Brandon Staley, did he get canned too? I think he only had a 1-year deal, but there's a lot of mystery around Brandon Staley. So we don't really know. I don't know how many years he signed for. Nobody knows what he did this past season. Maybe we'll get an answer to that tomorrow in the Shanahan Lynch press conference. Like I said, I don't know. So I would assume he's out. It doesn't seem like he has a long-term future with the club, but it's a good question, and we should ask. Gerardo H says, is Sorensen going to go back to DB coach? I don't know. He was the Jaguars special teams coach at one point, so maybe they want him for the special teams coach. I don't know. That's a good question. It's funny. I'm just seeing this tweet from Matt Barrows. Per league source, the Niners are moving on from Sorensen. Yeah, Shanahan and Lynch. That's the source. They're having the press conference tomorrow. They wanted it out there. Like, per league source. It's not like a mystery source. It's the team. The team is the league source. Anyway, this is not to get on Barrows. I love Barrows. I thought that was funny. A lot of people want to see Brandon Staley I don't think they're going to have to fire him. I think his contract is just going to be up, and that's going to be the end of it. Clyde Cash says, don't kid yourselves. Kyle is going with Gus Bradley. That's not that's not a crazy idea, Clyde. Gus Bradley is part of the Seattle scheme. He was in Seattle when they were developing that. We know that's the system the 49ers like, and he's available now because he's a free agent. He was fired. So if Kyle wants him, he could get him. And I really hope they don't go that route. I really hope they don't just try to get the best guy that runs the Seahawks, that Seattle scheme, that cover 3 scheme. Don't do that. That's not the only defensive system there is. You don't have to run that system. I talked about this with Vish on Monday. Their roster is not the same as it was when they first started this. Maybe they were better suited to that then. Now they've got different guys. They've got different players with different strengths and weaknesses. You got 2 really sticky man corners in Diamondor Lenore and Renardo Green. You obviously still have Bosa. You have Fred Warner. Fred Warner is one of the most versatile linebackers in the league. He can do a bunch of stuff. You don't have to play this system. I would interview as many people as possible if I were the 49ers. Get as many perspectives as you can and hear what other coaches think. What do they think of your roster? What do they want to do with it? What do they think is possible? Somebody might have an idea of something that you've never even considered before. Get outside perspective. Don't stay in your little bubble. It's a good sign that the 49ers may change as a special teams coordinator. It's a good sign that they may change at defensive coordinator. That's hopefully a sign of growth. But don't stay in your bubble and think, well, we just got to get a better guy at running the Seattle scheme. No, you got to have the best defense possible. And maybe it's not that. Maybe it is, but maybe it's not. And I hope that they are open to all angles. We're learning a little bit more now. Just checking Twitter really quickly. Tim Kawakami says, the tide changed for Sorensen over the last few weeks. The top players seemed less sure about him, and the defensive performances were not good. Sorensen wasn't dealt a great hand, but he probably wasn't the answer. Next question, does Shanahan have a line on who is? You could tell that Sorensen didn't have the support in the locker room when they asked Nick Bosa, what do you think of Sorensen? Do you want him to stay? And he said, I think he's a good coach, but it's not my decision. Like I said it on the instant reaction show. When somebody says that, when one of your leaders says that, what they're really saying is, I don't want this guy back. That was a chance for Nick Bosa to go to bat for Nick Sorensen. Yeah, I want him back. It wasn't his fault at all. It was on us as players. He's a good coach. I want him back next year. He didn't say that. Fred Warner, when asked about Nick Sorensen, said, hey, we didn't do him any favors. Again, that was your chance to say he definitely should be back. I love him, and we're going to go to battle with him next year. We'll get it right. Didn't do that. That's telling. And I think with Kyle Shanahan, we know the veterans have a tremendous, tremendous amount of influence. We saw it with Trey Lance when he was splitting time with Jimmy Garoppolo, and the vets went to Kyle and said, don't do that anymore. And he stopped it immediately. We saw it with Steve Wilks. They did not like Steve Wilks. He was immediately on the outs. They forced him to go down to the sideline. Fred Warner had a big role in that. And we obviously saw what happened with Steve Wilks after the season ended. He was immediately canned. And as we all know now, and I think people could see more now, Steve Wilks did a damn good job with this defense. Certainly better than Nick Sorensen did this year. Antonio, YouTube channel member. Thank you so much for the super chat. Antonio says it's unfortunate to give the guy only a year, but it was the right call. There are many great defensive coordinator options available. Mike Pettin intrigues me. He's an assistant head coach and a linebacker coach for the Vikings. There's a lot of guys out there. We can talk about some of that now. I saw a good tweet from David Lombardi, who threw out some names, which of course now I cannot find because I need to bring it up now, and I wanted to get to some of those names. Yes, here it is. The first name, obviously, at the top of the list, Jeff Ulbrich. The Niners wanted him before they hired Sorensen. Remember, first they went to Spagnuolo, then they went to Belichick, then they went to the Jets for Ulbrich, and Saleh blocked the move, and then they went to Sorensen. Well, guess what? Ulbrich's out there now because the Jets are changing the regime. So if they really want him, they could go get him. Robert Saleh is out there. I know a lot of people have a soft spot for Saleh. I don't think that is going to be a thing that happens. I don't think Saleh has interest in coming back. Frankly, he's got head coaching interviews. I think he's on the Jags list as a head coach candidate, I believe. So I don't think that coming back and working for Kyle Shanahan is high on Robert Saleh's list. Gus Bradley, we already talked about. Dennis Allen, who was with the Saints, longtime defensive coordinator in the league. Not a good head coach, but a very good defensive coordinator. Again, get him in for an interview. Just listen to what he has to say. Matt Eberflus, of course, who was with the Bears, another good defensive coordinator. Again, don't just rule a guy out because he was a bad head coach. They're different jobs. They're much different jobs. When you are a coordinator, you are sitting in a dark room, spending all your time, every minute of every day, analyzing every part of the offense or every part of the defense, coming up with ways to defeat it, tendencies, and how to take it down, how to destroy it. That's what your focus is. Scheme, and how to implement it. When you are the head coach, it's not that. It's much more of a CEO position. You play the orchestra. You are like the conductor of the orchestra. You don't just have to worry about your instrument. You got to play the whole thing. The story that Tony Dungy always tells is he became the head coach of the Buccaneers, and he's trying to work on the game plan, this and that. Somebody walked into his office and said, "Hey, coach, what hotel do you want to stay at the first preseason game?" And he said, "I don't know. Why the hell are you asking me?" And they said, "Because you're the head coach." And it was like, oh, yeah, these are the things that I have to deal with now that are on my plate. It's not just me in this dark room. I'm part of a much bigger world, and not everybody can do both. It's like that old Mitch Hedberg line when they say, "You're a good cook. Can you farm?" It's two different skills. I know they're related, but it's two different skills. So just because you might have been a bad head coach doesn't necessarily mean you are a bad coordinator. So Dennis Allen is on the list. I get that. Lou Anarumo, who is with the Bengals, I would love for them to at least talk to him. Please, again, perspectives. Get the perspectives, right? I think that the Niners should ask as many people as possible to be part of their organization and to see what they think about the roster. You never know. You never know what somebody else is going to say that might spark an idea or just put a thought in your mind that you never would have thought of. And smart organizations, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whatever it is, smart organizations value feedback, they value different perspectives, and they value outside perspectives. So it'll be very interesting to see what the 49ers do. But I think this is good. I think it's a sign that they know things have to change. Obviously, they're trying to change things, and I think it's a sign for the better. I think I missed a super chat. I'm sorry, Warlock. Any chance Kyle gives a wild card quarterback like Trey another chance? We can definitely get Jalen Milroe at the 11th pick. I have no idea. I don't think the Niners are focused on quarterback right now. Sort of more focused on defensive coordinator, Warlock, but I appreciate the super chat. I would always keep looking at quarterback, regardless of who you have and what the contract situation is. They're like starting pitchers. You can never have enough. M27 says this front office of the 49ers is a circus act. It's a fair criticism. Like we said, this is going to be the fourth defensive coordinator in 4 years. It's not a good look. Now, some of that is because guys got hired. They got jobs. But, Kyle's hired 2 defensive coordinators in 2 years, and he's fired them. So there is some sense to that, but I would rather them be too quick to get rid of a guy than stick with a guy that they know is not it. I would much rather say, you know what, if it ain't working, don't just stick with him so you don't look bad for firing him. If it ain't it, get rid of it. Move on. And we'll see if the 49ers have the same attitude with some of the players, but I would rather them, like I said, if it ain't working, get rid of it. Let's see some of the other comments in the chat. Benjamin says, here's an out there suggestion, Pete Carroll. Now, that would be a hell of a thing. Bring Pete Carroll back to the organization. Remember, Pete Carroll used to be the 49ers defensive coordinator at one point. I'm old enough to remember when Pete Carroll was 49ers defensive coordinator. That's a real thing that happened. I know we think of him more as a Seahawks coach. He wants to be a head coach again. And also, like, I can't speak, for the NFL as a whole, but I know that Kyle Shanahan cooked the hell out of Pete Carroll at the end of the tenure. They were kicking the Seahawks' ass. I think maybe, defense may have passed Pete Carroll by. He would be one of the oldest coordinators in the league, if not the oldest, off the top of my head. But would I sit him down for an interview? Sure. Why the hell not? Black Mask says Richard Sherman or Patrick Willis is crazy. These guys have never coached. I saw a lot of talk about Sherman. People wanted Sherman to do it. No. Again, unless he's like a savant, they have no coaching experience. I know they're names that we know and we love, but that's not the angle I want to go. I want an experienced defensive coordinator. I want a defensive coordinator that knows what he's doing. And please, 49ers, for the love of God, whoever you hire, let him pick his staff. That would be the first question I would ask Kyle and John tomorrow at the press conference. Okay, you fired Nick Sorensen. You're going to hire another defensive coordinator. Are you going to let this person pick their own staff? Or are you going to force them to work with the coaches that are already here with the Chris Kasarik? I know the 49ers think Chris Kasarik walks on water, the defensive line coach. You know what? Everybody else that's won a Super Bowl has done it without Chris Kasarik, okay? If they want him, great, but don't force them to work with him. That's my point. Let whoever the new defensive coordinator is bring in his own people. If you force that guy to work with the coaches that are already on staff, you chop his legs out from under him in front of the team. The veterans know what's up. Well, you're here to run our stuff. You work for us. You chop the respect right out from under him. Let whoever you hire at DC pick their staff, please. And I hope that's a question that they ask Kyle and John. That should be one of the first questions. If I had to pick, I would say, 1, why did you make this move? 2, why should we have confidence that you can pick a defensive coordinator when you fired the last 2 after 1 year? 3, whoever you hire, can they bring in their own staff? If they don't give you a good answer, why or why not? Do you think that cuts the credibility away? I mean, you kind of go from there based off of what they say. But please let the person do what they want to do. Bring in your team. And that should be part of the screening process and the interview process. Okay, you want to be our defensive coordinator. Great. Who do you want to work with? Who are your coaches? That's the same thing they ask head coach candidates when they have an interview. Great. You want to come? Okay, you're a defensive coach. Who's your offensive coordinator going to be? The staff is a huge, huge part of it. It is a massively, I think, overlooked thing by a lot of people. They don't consider it, but it's not just, you're not hiring just one coach, I should say. You're not hiring just a defensive coordinator. You're hiring a DC and a defensive line coach and a secondary coach, a linebackers coach, yada, yada, yada. But I hope that they let whoever they hire bring in their own staff. I'm seeing some more tweets now. Okay, let me just throw this one up on the screen because I think I like it. It's kind of a double tweet from Tim Kawakami of the San Francisco Standard. Tim said, I got to actually put it on the screen. This isn't the main factor, but at some point, Shanahan and Lynch also had to consider that they fired Wilkes last year for running a better defense than Sorensen did this year. If they kept Sorensen, it could have been concluded that it was just because he was familiar. That's not a great reason. I agree. And then Tim said, 49er source, everybody likes Sorensen, but it seemed he was not fully prepared for this job. You think? I mean, God, first of all, he was your fourth choice to be defensive coordinator. You could see it. You could see he wasn't prepared for the job. They asked him, what have you learned this year? He was like, I learned a lot. But he couldn't name one single thing that he actually learned. He just talked about how he learned a lot and he likes to learn and everybody should learn. That's not an answer, dude. The 49ers should have learned by now. When you stick with the guy that's there, it's not going to work out. It's like hiring the interim head coach. It never works out. The Raiders just found this out. They fired Antonio Pierce today. What did the Niners do? They fired Jim Harbaugh. They hired Jim Tomsula, right? Because he was there, because they knew him, and he wasn't going to make any waves. Disaster. Immediately fired. They couldn't get a DC, right? They were in the Super Bowl, all the coaches were gone. They fired Steve Wilkes. It was like, shoot, who are we going to get? Well, who did they go to? The other team that was in the Super Bowl, because they had a great defensive coordinator and he was available because his contract was up. And then they went to Bill Belichick, who was fired. Like, there weren't a lot of great options at that time also. Now, one of the benefits of not making the playoffs, if you want to call it that, is that there are other coaches out there. You can't stick with a guy that's just here, like a spare guy. Well, he's around. That's not a good reason to promote somebody. I mean, damn, defensive coordinator is a pretty damn important job. You can't just give it to the dude that's there. So, yeah, it was not going to, it was always a long shot that it was going to work. It clearly didn't work. And at least the 49ers have acknowledged their mistake, right? We all could see it was a mistake. Yeah, and they probably shouldn't have done it, but they did. And at least now they're doing something to rectify it, right? Like, part of the question that they should have asked themselves before they fired Steve Wilkes was, well, if we fire this guy, who are we going to get? They didn't know if they could get Spagnuolo, right? That was a shot in the dark. It was a shot worth taking, 100%, but it was no guarantee. Belichick, same thing. Of course, great shot to take. But if you're going to fire Steve Wilkes, especially after the year that he had, you got to have a plan in place. And it didn't look like the 49ers had any sort of stable plan, and it backfired on them, and we got stuck with Nick Sorensen for a year. Now they're out. They got a chance to rectify it. Alejandro says, bring in Jim Leonard, Denver Broncos defensive back coach. That secondary has been lights out. He's been another guy that's gotten a lot of pub as a coaching candidate. I've heard a lot about. He played in the league, of course. And now I didn't realize he was the D-backs coach for the Broncos. It'd be an interesting candidate. I'll say that. I don't know too much about him other than he used to play in the league, and I know a lot of people mentioned his name. Here's the thing with coaching candidates that I want to share a little behind the scenes for anyone that doesn't know. I worked at ESPN for 7 years on ESPN Radio. I worked at NBC Sports on Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio and Chris Sims for 7 years. I learned a little bit about how the league works from some of the people that have been involved in it, okay? A lot of the, quote, hot coaching candidates that you hear about and front office candidates, especially guys that are like assistant GM, assistant coach, position coach. A lot of the guys that get hyped up as hot candidates are actually guys that have just been feeding insiders information over the years. That's the quid pro quo that goes on, right? You become a source for Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport or Mike Florio, whoever the case may be. And I'm not saying Florio did this. I never heard anything about that. Just want to make that clear on the record. But I imagine if it works that way for other insiders, maybe it works that way for Mike Florio. Although I have to say, I don't remember Mike ever pumping up an assistant head coach as like a hot commodity. But maybe he did. I don't know. The point is this. When you become a source for people, they do you a favor in return. Hey, there's a lot of buzz around this guy. Hey, a lot of people are talking about this guy, right? So don't just hear like, oh, this guy's a lot of buzz around this guy. They must be a good head coach or a good position coach or a good coordinator. Nobody freaking knows, right? Just take everything with a grain of salt is my only point. Just take everything with a grain of salt. Benjamin says, hey, Rob, you know who else didn't make it for a year? Rand Carthon. I think he was there for 2 years, but yeah, he got fired too. Wouldn't mind bringing him back home to San Francisco. He was in the front office for a while. Ian Sharp says Wilkes was supposed to be a great secondary coach. See, that's the thing too. Again, it's different jobs, right? Secondary coach is different from defensive coordinator. That's an even smaller dark room that you're in when you're the position coach. It's different jobs. So just because you're good at one doesn't necessarily mean you're good at the other. Jonathan says Robert Saleh is not coming back. All you fanboys need to let it go. I completely agree. John says the thing with Ulbrich is look at the Jets defense when Saleh was booted. That doesn't inspire confidence. Yeah, it was not ideal. Now, don't forget, right? So when Robert Saleh's there, he's helping out on defense as a head coach, some. Then Ulbrich is there, and he's got all the other coaches. But when you remove Saleh from the game plan, and then you remove Ulbrich from the game plan, and he becomes the head coach, he's out of that dark room. That's 2 hits essentially that the defense takes. So that's a lot of brain drain from one side of the ball. So that is not surprising why they got worse, because you're taking a lot of brain power out of that side of the ball. Wetbridge says, I'm fully fine with Ulbrich coming back. Been a fan of him since he was a player. Okay, but again, different jobs. Like we don't latch onto a name that you know just because you know the name, if that makes sense. Let's explore everybody. In the days to come, we'll do just like we did last year. We'll do profiles on the names that come out in the interview. I highly doubt that they're going to have a new name by tomorrow's press conference. That would be pretty damn fast. But when the names come out of who they want to interview, we'll do some profiles. We'll learn about all these people together, right? But don't just say, well, it's Ulbrich is cool or Sala would be great because we know them and that'll fix everything. No, let's get the best candidate for the job. Let's learn about these people. We don't have to decide the second we hear the name. Let's see what actually happens. But the big news, if you're just joining us, the 49ers are firing Nick Sorensen as defensive coordinator. The word is that they want to retain him on the staff, which, I mean, good Lord. He was the special teams coordinator in Jacksonville in 2021. If I'm Nick Sorensen, I'm saying, I'm out of here. Like, if he takes a job back on the staff, one, that proves that he knew he wasn't ready for the job. And two, I don't think it's a good look for somebody. Like, dude, you promoted me, you fired me after 1 year, and now you want me back? No, thanks. I'll get a job somewhere else. But look, I know there's other considerations. Maybe he doesn't want to move his family, all that stuff. But I don't know. Moonman Ed says Gerard Mayo 2.0, sadly. Gerard Mayo would be, he's out there. He didn't have a job now that he got fired as Patriots head coach. Here's a question for the chat. How good a job is 49ers defensive coordinator? And I mean that seriously, because remember, Steve Wilks did a damn good job for this team as defensive coordinator. The Niners defense had a stretch after the bye where they held 5 straight opponents to under 20 points. 5 straight. They beat Jacksonville 34-3. They beat Tampa 27-14. Seattle 31-13. Philly 42-19 in Philly. Seattle 28-16. Like, they were a damn good defense. We know what happened with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl, but damn, the Chiefs only scored 25 points and it took overtime to get him to there. They fired that guy. Then they bring in Nick Sorensen. He's worse. They fire him. 49ers job comes with extremely high expectations, because what are the expectations going to be for this coordinator, right? They're going to hire somebody and they're going to go, oh, look, you got Bosa, you got Warner. Great. You got Malik Mustafa. He's a great young safety. You've got 2 good corners. You should be right back to where things were with DeMeco Ryans, because he's the guy that everybody's going to compare this hire to, right? That's unfair. That's very unfair expectations. It's entirely possible the personnel on defense is going to be even worse next year. Who knows? They got some free agents. They got some holes they got to replace. We don't know, obviously, health-wise, what the situation is going to be. So I'm not sure this is a great job. Plus, I don't know how much fun Kyle Shanahan is to work for. I don't know. Maybe he's great. Maybe he's not. You know, I've read a lot of stuff about how Kyle is kind of a pain in the ass, and John Lynch sort of has to smooth things out with people throughout the week because Kyle's a big grump. Is that, a great person to work for? I don't know. And again, I'm far removed from the situation. I don't know if Kyle's great to work for or not, but that's a consideration, obviously. So you're talking about a job with super high expectations, a job where you're going to be compared with one of the bright young defensive minds in the sport in DeMeco Ryans, even though he hasn't been there in a couple of years. You're in a division now that's looking tougher by the day, and say what you want about the NFC West, but it was the only division in the NFL where every team won at least 6 games. You've got some good offenses in the division, right? Obviously, the Rams are still a good offense. The Seahawks fired their offensive coordinator, but they certainly have weapons there. The Cardinals have weapons. The Cardinals won 8 games this year. Seahawks won 10 games this year. So a lot of your games are going to be against good offenses. Now, the benefit is the Niners will have a last place schedule, so that may help you look good in your first year. But that's high expectations. It's a challenging spot to be in. So that's not the most glamorous job. I will say that. Kyle's going to get all the credit, right? If the Niners have any success, it's going to be about the offense. It's going to be about Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey and Kittle and all those guys. It's a tough job. Hunter Ellis says Kyle wants to be GM. Just ask Siri. Look at our current guy. Sorry, that wasn't the comment I wanted to click on. I apologize. Curly Hair Jr. says Jim Schwartz is also available. Well experienced wide nine coach. I don't want the wide nine. Black Mass says go get Spagnuolo. They tried last year when his contract ran out. He didn't want to work with Kyle Shanahan. He wisely wanted to stick with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They tried. Bruce says Chris Kocurek needs to go too. Wide nine stinks. I would not be opposed to that. If they kept it, okay, but I at least want to know that they considered other people. Like, I remember last year when they asked Shanahan, like, are you going to stick with the same system or are you going to go to a new system? What he said was, well, I'd be open to a new system, but you got to convince me it's better, and I really like what we have here. I'll be fascinated and really interested to see if he answers that question the same way this time around. I hope he doesn't. I really hope he doesn't. And that's kind of my overarching hope for this offseason. I've said it before that, the Niners can sort of delude themselves. At least before this year, they could have deluded themselves. They could have tricked themselves into saying, hey, what we were doing was really working. We won a ton of games. Circumstance, some bounces of the ball didn't go our way, and we didn't end up winning. But what we're doing is working. They can't say that after this season because, yeah, they've had injuries, but they have mucked up a whole bunch of stuff, a ton of stuff. And what they normally do wasn't working. The defense wasn't working. It was broken. The offense was struggling all year long. They struggled in the red zone. Deebo Samuel had 3 receiving touchdowns. The only player on offense that was consistently good all year was George Kittle. That was it. Nobody else was. They never had McCaffrey, Ayuk, and Deebo on the field at the same time this year. It wasn't working. Changes have to be made. So I hope that their eyes are open now. I really do. And we'll find out a lot at the press conference tomorrow because I'm sure Kyle's going to get asked that. And I think what he says and how he says it are going to tell us a lot about their philosophy and their thinking. Eric Branch tweeted, the last time the 49ers had consecutive one-and-done defensive coordinators was 2015 and 2016 with Eric Mangini and Jim O'Neill. No, thank you. Those are some rough years, let me tell you. Coaching matters so much in the NFL. It is such a big deal, bigger than any other sport. And head coach gets a lot of the attention, and I get that. But, man, these coordinator jobs are massively, massively important. And the ability to find and replace coaches as they leave is an underrated skill that a good head coach has to have. Kyle had done a good job of that, right? He found Saleh. Saleh turned into a great defensive coordinator. He immediately replaced them with DeMeco Ryans, and they kicked ass, and you were like, damn, that's awesome. And then the wheels kind of fell off in terms of choosing defensive coordinators. You have to be able to replace your coaches as they leave, especially when you're as successful as the 49ers have been. You notice they win 6 games this year. Nobody gives a crap about any of their coaches. Brian Grease is the only guy that's even got an interview somewhere else. But when you're good, the vultures come and they pick at your staff. And Kyle's been good at replacing them, but now he's got to do it again. He's got to do it on the defensive side of the ball. I have always thought that Kyle would never have a bad defensive coordinator because of how he grew up. For anyone that doesn't know, Kyle would sit in on the defensive meetings with Monty Kiffin in Tampa Bay. And Mike Tomlin, I believe, was there at that time. And some other great coaches. Shanahan would sit in on the defensive meetings because he wanted to learn how they thought. He wanted to learn their rules for defense and how they broke down an offense. And it's part of the reason that Kyle is so good at cracking the code on other teams' defenses because he did have that upbringing. And so I thought that because of that, you weren't going to be able to come in as a coach and blow smoke up Kyle's ass about, oh, well, here's why I'll be a great defensive coordinator, because Kyle actually knows that side of the ball. So I was thinking, hey, the Niners will always have a good defensive coordinator. What I didn't realize was, hey, if you're in the Super Bowl and you lose and all the other coaches are gone, your options are sort of limited. And I think that's what bit the Niners in the ass last year. Brian Smith says Vrabel will get a head coaching gig. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a DC. I think he's already interviewed with the Jets. He's got multiple head coach offerings. I don't think he's going to go back to being a defensive coordinator. Kenneth says Patrick Graham for defensive coordinator. I think, was he in Vegas this past year? I know he's bounced around a couple different places. He's been a hot name. for a couple of years. He's been a guy that's gotten a lot of interviews. He was the defensive coordinator for the Raiders last year. He was also a DC for the Giants and the Dolphins. He was an inside linebacker coach for the Packers and an assistant for the Patriots. We know the Niners like assistant linebacker coaches as DC. We know that they generally like that. That would be interesting. Spy Dirty says trade Kyle. Okay, but then you still need a defensive coordinator. That doesn't help. Niner Vega says, please let's hire the Chiefs defensive backs coach. Was that Dave Merritt? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. They interviewed him last year, I believe, for the DC spot. And I think, didn't he like kind of talk trash after he didn't get that job? Let me see if I can Google that real quick because, yeah, it is Dave Merritt. I thought that he said something on a podcast and it was kind of, yeah. Okay, here, I'm pulling it up. Let me see. Let me see if I can throw it on the screen here. We can read it together. Dave Merritt interviewed to be the 49ers defensive coordinator. Oh, that's way too small. He didn't get the job. Here's what Merritt said. Steve Wilks is looking at this as a blessing, meaning getting fired. I understand they want to go in a different direction, but if you want to base it purely off the Super Bowl, that's not the case, and we all know that. There's always something behind a marriage if it's not going well. It doesn't just happen overnight. But if you want to talk about that game, the offense, meaning Shanahan's offense, went 3 of 12 on third down. Our offense went 9 of 19. If your offense is going 3 of 12 on third down, is that Wilks' fault? If your tight end who's an all-pro, Kittle only has 4 yards, is that Wilks' fault? You can feed McCaffrey all you want to. He needs help. And then number 11, who was trying to fight all game, Ako or whoever, apparently he called him Ako, he only had 40-something yards. Was that Wilks' fault? There was something going on before this all went down. Do the 49ers care about that? Does it matter at all? I have no idea. Interesting quotes. Maybe they want that sort of honest assessment. Maybe that doesn't bother Kyle. He always talks about how he's honest and real with guys. Maybe he wouldn't care about that. I have no idea. But I'd forgotten about those. And I think maybe Dave Merritt was also defending Steve Wilks a little bit. A lot of people thought Steve Wilks got a raw deal last year, including me. They set him up as a scapegoat. They were much bigger problems than Steve Wilks last year for sure. Alejandro Sandoval. What about any college guys? Always a possibility. Levin talked with me and he mentioned, I said on the air on some show, I can't remember, maybe it was the Instant Reaction show. He thinks a lot of college defensive coordinators are more creative with their schemes than pro guys because they have to be, essentially. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't watch a ton of college football. I can't tell you who's a good college defensive coordinator. I have no idea. If a name comes up that the 49ers are interested in, I'll research that guy. I'll find out. I'll talk to people who know more about it than me and have them on, and we could talk about that. But I can't give you any names right now. I would just be pure BSing you, and I will never do that. So I have no idea. Black Mass says, what is Wilks even doing? I don't know. That's a good question. He didn't get a job anywhere. Let's see. Yeah, I don't think he's doing anything right now. No chance him coming back. I'll just say that. I don't think that is going to be a possibility for the 49ers. Brandon says, Lou Anarumo always did a good job against the Chiefs. The Bengals fired him. Again, he's somebody that would be on my list to at least interview. Cynthia says it was dirty the way they did Wilks, and we said it at the time. I completely agree with you. So there's a lot of names out there. And again, maybe we'll get some more insight tomorrow when the Niners speak. But the news is that they fired defensive coordinator Nick Sorensen. We'll see if they can actually get him to stay on the staff. Again, I don't think that would be a good look for him. I'm just seeing this tweet from Eric Branch, who's recounting what Fred Warner said on Monday about Nick Sorensen. As a coach, you have to be the one to hold the players accountable. I felt like he did that. It's his first season. He obviously got to look back and see what he could have been better in his role. Did he really hold players accountable, though? Because, again, I saw the same mistakes over and over and over again. I saw Isaac Yadam out there over and over and over again early in the year. Devondre Campbell had a D winners over and over and over again. Now, maybe he was getting overruled by Kyle. I don't know. But I certainly didn't see accountability on defense. How many times did this defense get penalty after penalty after penalty? I didn't see accountability. Did you? I mean, these games are on TV, right? It's not a secret. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see, but I think it's a good sign that the 49ers decided to make the move. It's a sign of growth, or at least a chance for growth, a chance for adjustment. It's a big decision coming up and how this season's going to go. Could affect everything, right? If they do decide to change systems, could affect their entire draft, could affect who they go after in free agency, could be a big fork in the road for this franchise. Could change their decision-making on some guys that are free agents. I wouldn't be in a rush to bring back anybody like Talanoa Hufanga or Mooney Ward or anything like that. But if they change schemes, maybe it changes their mind. We don't know. So this is a big decision. A big, big decision. Somebody's saying Al Golden. I don't know anything about Al Golden, but add him to the list, right? Like in Dumb and Dumber. Pick him up. That's kind of how I feel. I want to talk to as many people as possible. Don't just do the wide nine stuff. And it's a test to Kyle Shanahan, right? Look, he's been around and in the NFL for his whole life. He's got to know a lot of people. Time to put that Rolodex to good use, right? Dial it up. Find somebody. You got more candidates out now than you had last time. Guys are getting released all the time. Got to nail this one. Because let's be honest, you're probably not going to get a chance to hire another defensive coordinator, right? Like at some point, I know that Jed York said that Lynch and Shanahan aren't going anywhere, and that's fine. But if they miss the playoffs again next year, are they really going to get another shot? Probably not. So this is a big-time hire for Kyle Shanahan. It's a big decision. And also, he can fall back on the Rolodex of John Lynch and some of the other people in the organization. It's not just on Kyle. But, yeah, it's a real thing. So at least we got the news that a lot of people wanted. Nick Sorensen is out. We'll be all over this story. Of course, we'll react. I'll be live with Steph Sanchez tomorrow. Right after the press conference, we'll be breaking it down. What's happening with the 49ers? What do they say? Are they going to let somebody hire his own staff? Are they going to change the scheme? All those questions, at least hopefully, will be answered tomorrow. That's a wrap of this instant reaction show. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming aboard. We really appreciate it. We're live after all Niners breaking news. We're live every single weekday. When the Niners play, we're live immediately after the game. Please give us a like and a subscribe if you would. I promise we won't let you down. If you want more from me, I'm on all the socials at Stats on Fire. Give me a follow. Hopefully, I will make you a better, smarter fan. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday night, everybody. We'll talk tomorrow.